Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
This is the Long Island Report on 107.1 WLIR. Using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Good afternoon. This is the Long Island Report. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. On the call with me is my esteemed colleague, Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the state vice chair of the Republican Party as well as the county chair of Suffolk County. And Jesse and I are honored and privileged indeed to have a good friend, a brilliant government official, a great governor of this great state, Governor David Paterson. Governor, welcome aboard. We're very happy to have you here today.
Thank you, Your Honor, and good to meet you, Jesse.
So,
my pleasure. Thank you for being here, sir.
So let's do the obvious one first, which is we had the first of 2 primary elections yesterday, and there were some obvious results and some mixed results. Governor, what do you think about yesterday's primary?
Well, I was sure that Governor Kathy Hochul would win the primary, and I thought she would win by double digits. But she was getting close to triple digits. She beat Jumaane Williams by 50 points, and she beat Tom Suozzi by 56 points. So that was a clear statement that she is the winner. It was low turnout, and that's always a factor as to how those votes will translate in a general election. And I was surprised that the lieutenant governor, Mr. Delgado, was able to win by the same margin that Hochul did, which I thought was quite interesting because he only became lieutenant governor about a month ago and got the approval to run by the legislature about a month and a half ago. So for him to run up that margin, although he had some, I thought, very interesting and energizing television commercials.
Okay. And Jesse, what did you think on the Republican side? What did you think of the result of that 4-way primary for the governorship?
I was very optimistic about going the process in. Lee Zeldin, a member of the Suffolk County, a resident of Suffolk County, he'll be the first and only first governor from Suffolk County when he's elected on November 8th. But the numbers he ran up were impressive. I believe that the Republican side was a far more competitive race than from start to finish than the Democratic side. But we saw that Lee Zeldin was able to articulate and passionately lay out a plan to save New York, to bring a common sense and agenda that will seek common ground and break the gridlock of one-party rule in Albany. And the voters of this state responded amazingly. In a 4-way race, he received about north of 44% of the votes cast, and almost 20 points plus more than his closest competitor. At the end of that evening, the United Republican Party was united. We're going to move forward together because we have one goal in mind. And as a tip of the hat, and I will take a little bit of privilege here, to the members and the volunteers of the Suffolk County Republican Committee, my committee at home here, we overwhelmingly ran up the numbers for Lee Zeldin. And what we saw is, I think we provided about 47,000 votes for his total number of about 193,000 votes, and that represented about almost 25% of the votes. Between us and Long Island and Nassau County, we were about 78,000 votes for Lee Zeldin. And maybe a little bit later we'll discuss the fact that one small anecdote that we picked up here in Suffolk County, and I think we saw throughout the state, is a bunch of voters not of the Republican Party, who were energized and wanted to vote Republican for Lee Zeldin, but could not because the election law says only members of that party could. And that day, on Tuesday, they started the process of switching from Democrat and independent and whatever party they may have been, switching to the Republican Party, which bodes well as we go forward into November for Lee Zeldin.
Well, Governor, let me ask you a question. Let's do a prediction, an analysis and prediction. What do you think is going to happen in November? First the governor, then the chairman. Governor.
Well, I think that Governor Kathy Hochul will be reelected. And I think she'll be reelected for two reasons. One is the work that she's done, really turning that governor's office around because it was a toxic environment, and also putting people in charge of agencies who really have the capacity to understand what they're doing as opposed to the kind of micromanaging that was going on. And also her speed in addressing issues, which I thought was lacking prior. The other reason that I think she's going to win is not because of her so much, or even because of Congressman Zeldin. It's just that right now there is an atmosphere based on the Sullivan Law, the overturning of New York's gun statutes, and also the issue of voting rights, and of course also the issue of choice, that most New York voters are not going to support Congressman Zeldin because of some of the points of view that he has. Now, what could have overcome that would be the crime rate, in my opinion, lack of empathy of too many Democrats in the state right now about the crime rate, the ignorance of many of the legislators about what bail even means, more or less bail reform. And I think they would have played a greater role, but I think we're in this sort of situation where the national issues may actually propel the governor more than the local ones.
So let's switch some gears. We talked about the governor's race, and I want to ask the governor and the chairman, what do you think about the prospects of changes in the state legislature itself, both the state Senate and the Assembly? I'll start with you, Governor.
I actually agree with the county chair, Jesse, on that. I think that the supermajority was a reaction to Donald Trump in 2018. That's when you saw these huge moves where the Democrats went from 2 seats down to 17 seats up in one election. And I think in 2020, it was more of the same because Trump was actually on the ballot. But we don't know. We know that Donald Trump is no longer president, and he's not on the ballot. So now some of these legislators are going to have to defend their actions on their own. And some of their just blind disregard for some of the issues that New Yorkers face. And listen, the fear of crime is as much an indicator as the commission of crime. And so I do think that my party will lose seats in the Senate and the Assembly. They will not lose enough for anyone, in my opinion, to change the way they've been not cooperating with the important public issues. However, if they're going to cooperate, I think they will do so more for Governor Hochul than for Governor Zeldin, who would be just, his views are just not in sync with theirs. So his ability to change things would be as impaired as Governor Hochul's was. The real issue right now would be that the legislature kind of wake up and recognize that we're having a very increased focus on crime. And unlike the crime in the 80s, what's different now is the crime in the 80s came from crack being basically the epicenter of the beginning of crack was in New York City. It was in Harlem. but it spread to different neighborhoods. But as long as you stayed away from those neighborhoods, you were all right. But you could get hurt on 61st and Park Avenue now. And that's, I think, what's frightening New Yorkers all over the state even more.
Jesse, what do you say about the state legislative prospect?
I think we're in agreement. I think the state legislature's supermajorities are going to be broken. I think that we're going to see significant gains. And it's my hope, though, that – and you know what? The one telling sign we have here, and I believe Governor Paterson is someone who actually utilized these tools and provided it, is that a soon-to-be Governor Zeldin will be able to use the budget and the laws that were enacted or the decisions that were enacted after, I believe, Governor, you took the legislature to court to ensure the powers of the executive, where the executive has more authority when it comes to a budget, even if it's not settled. And I believe that's going to be a tool he's going to be able to use, whether both chambers remain Democrat or even if one chamber goes to the other. Those are tools that need to be used to do what needs to be enacted for the purposes of ensuring small businesses are protected, school reform is affected, and we have issues like mandates and whatnot go about the wayside. Some policy issues and policy differences that will force legislators through those tools to seek a compromise and common ground.
I have to say, gentlemen,
I just must say, Your Honor, that I am beaming.
Yes.
Because I thought somewhere in this state somebody remembered that I actually did that, and now I found that person. Well, I am quite honored.
We're going to give Jesse. We're going to give him a merit badge.
Well, very briefly, it was just that what the legislature would do is just hold up the budget process.
Yes.
And stop the governor from doing what the governor wanted to do. What I did was we researched and found out that the extenders that extend government while you're still negotiating a lot of the issues, that those extenders are offered by the governor but cannot be negotiated. The legislature has to vote it up or down. And you should have seen the faces of former Senate Majority Leader who wound up in a whole lot of trouble, John Sampson, and former Republican leader and former Speaker Sheldon Silver when I told them I was going to do that, because that moved the power that the governor has, and whichever candidate wins this race will be able to exercise. So, Jesse, I owe you one.
Well, actually, the entire population of the state of New York owes you, Governor, on that one. Let me ask you this question. I'll give you my take, and I'll get the opinion of the governor and the chair. I thought yesterday's legislative results, and remember, we're only talking about the assembly, as both of you gentlemen know. The August 23rd, the second primary, will have the congressional seats and the state Senate seats. But I thought the results were pretty good in pushing back the extreme left-wing tide of the Democratic Socialists and the Working Families Party. They picked up maybe 2 or 3 seats, but I think they pretty much were beaten back because there was a whole attempt to change. I don't know what the number was. Every time you read a different article, it says something else, 9, 11, 13 seats. So, Governor, what do you say about that?
Well, I've been saying, and of course, you and I are both on Cats at Night, so you know that I've been saying this the last year, that this whole issue about defunding the police probably relates to 10 to 12% of Democratic voters. Nobody wants to defend the police. In fact, Mayor David Dinkins, when he was in office, he actually expanded funding for the police.
Let the record be clear, Governor. Let's be clear. That was a Speaker Peter Vallone initiative, and Mayor Dinkins went along with it. I want the record to be clear.
Yes, he did. And,
Thank you.
And they both came to, and Vallone was right there in Albany in the Senate and in the Assembly when we voted for it. So kudos to our dear friend as well. But I really think, particularly when economic times are as harsh as they are now, that voters are more pragmatic. They don't want to hear about, what the communists thought when they were drinking tea in 1949 after the revolution in China. They don't want to hear any of that. They think about their weekly budget. They think about filling up a car with gas and paying $85 for it, and they think about who they think would be most able to alleviate that. And so I thought it was a small percentage, but a resounding rejection of this kind of socialist thinking.
Jesse.
I wish I agree with the governor on a lot of points, but I still believe that the Democrats in control of the state legislature and of the governor's mansion in the state of New York are still beholden. They're captured and they're captive of the far left group. They're captured and captured by the Generises of the world, the AOCs of the world, and so forth. That's what has led to us, unfortunately, to these very failed policies that are hurting taxpayers in their pocketbook and making them feel unsafe in their communities, while Albany and bureaucrats and elected officials continue to try and isolate us by, forwarding and advancing these type of mandates that threaten our liberties and our freedoms. I still think that, unfortunately, these leaders in both chambers are beholden and are fearful of those factions in their chambers because they want to hold on to their leadership positions. But in doing so, it's an average New Yorker that's suffering from all this.
All right, we have to take a break now. This is the Long Island Report. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. On the call with us is Governor David Paterson and Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back in a moment.
Your snacking routine can get a little dull. Time for a light and fit remix. Like a crunchy storm of graham cookies, caramel pearls, and dark chocolate, showering down into a smooth, creamy yogurt. Enjoy 3 light and fit remix varieties with craveable flavors and up to 120 calories and 10 grams of protein per 4.5-ounce serving. See remixyogurt.com.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
This is the Long Island Report. This is Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my esteemed colleague and good friend, Jesse Garcia. Jesse is the Vice Chair of the State Republican Party and the County Chair of the Suffolk Republican Party. We were honored and privileged to have Governor David Paterson, a Democrat, on the first segment with us, talking about the primary election results and the trends coming out of that and perspectives, what's going to happen in November. Jesse, I want to raise 2 important cases that came out of the Supreme Court and what your thoughts are. The first one is the Roe versus Wade decision, which very clearly, and I wish people would read the cases before they spout off and offered opinions and hit the panic button. But fundamentally, all Roe versus Wade said was there was a constitutional right to an abortion. That's what it said. The fact is they made that up out of whole cloth. I say that to you as a lawyer and as a judge. Forget about the public policy. I'm just telling you from a pure legal point of view, there is no constitutional right to abortion. So when it was set aside by the Dobbs case just recently, last week, what it did was it said there's no constitutional right. It didn't ban abortions at all. It just sent it back to the states. And it seems to me both political parties are trying to make hay out of this to get fundraising and to rally their bases. What do you say?
I agree. I believe that both parties are making hay of it for, political purposes of fundraising and energizing the base. It is not working on the Democratic side. I can just tell you about this small corner of our region here on Long Island. The decision came out in the middle of early voting for the gubernatorial primaries, and we did not see. We saw Democrats flat coming out in early voting, and early voting is one of their political tools to advance their agenda and advance their candidates. So we saw that flat. In fact, in Suffolk County and in Nassau County, it's my understanding that Republicans outpaced Democratic voters in early voting. But I think you said it right then. This is not banning abortions. This is simply instituting what has been put forth in the Constitution by our founding fathers. This is an issue that should be placed in the hands of the people and should be placed in the hands of individual state legislatures. They are the closest form of the government to the people. They should reach these decisions through debate, consultation, and consensus. and by seeking out experts. Certainly, I'm pro-life, and I applaud this decision. But again, we are getting fed by the mainstream media and big tech and corporate interests that are basically saying that that the Supreme Court banned abortions. They did not ban abortions. And I think you and I, Judge, talked about this. You put this on my radar. The late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Ginsburg, she made mention of this on several occasions in speeches before law schools and as a member of justice, that Roe v. Wade was not that strong constitutionally, and I think that we have to have respect for decisions. I mean, I respected the decision, did not agree with it when the Supreme Court ruled that Obamacare could stay in effect, despite my opposition to it. They found it to be as a final arbiter, transparently, with integrity, as able to be the law of the land at that point until the legislature changed it. And I think that that's the way we should do it. We didn't take to the streets, we didn't burn down cities, and we shouldn't do that now.
I agree with you, Jesse. That's very well said. I'll tell you a couple of points. Number one, I believe this is as divisive or divisive issue that has come down in my lifetime, and it's unnecessarily so. There'll be plenty of places where abortions can be had. That's number one. Number two, the personal attacks and the physical threats against justices of the United States Supreme Court, the torching and the firebombing of pregnancy centers is absolutely awful, and that's been going on. Putting signage on Catholic churches saying to the effect that if you can't have safe abortions, you're not safe either, making this a religious issue. This is just horrific, which is why I'm desperately afraid about this being a divisive, emotional issue. People need to step back and understand what was said and what the opportunities are. In fact, the Democrats are now proposing doing a federal piece of legislation in the Congress, Jesse, which create a statutory right to abortion under federal law, and that would be bottomed on the so-called interstate commerce sections of the United States Constitution. Now, whether that would survive a legal test or not, I offer no opinion, but I know that's what they're looking at, and they can do that. But even if they don't create a statutory right under federal law to an abortion, half the states easily will have places where you can have safe abortions. Half the states may regulate them or perhaps ban them, but there will be plenty of places where a woman can get a safe and affordable abortion. Now, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about another divisive issue, and that's the Second Amendment so-called gun control law. It's known as the Sullivan Law here in New York State. Fundamentally, what happened in that case, again, it's a simple case. Under New York law, if I wanted to get a gun, Jesse, I would have to go into the local agency, the police department, and say that for this concealed carry permit, I would have to say that I have a particularized need, a special showing why I'm entitled to that, because I'm under threat of physical attack, my personal security, or if I'm in a business that's a cash business, any kind of cash business, or third, if I'm a doctor or a dentist and I have supplies of drugs on my premises. So that particularized showing was set aside because the Supreme Court said you can't make that. There's a general right under the Second Amendment to have guns. You don't have to have a particularized showing, but you can have reasonable regulations as to time, place, and manner. So therefore, if I applied for a gun permit, Jesse, they could do a search on me, find out if I had a history of mental illness, I had criminal convictions, I had domestic violence history, and then they could regulate that, and they could also make sure that there was a time frame so that you couldn't get a gun overnight in the heat of passion. What do you say about that?
I think that, listen, Judge, I think you're someone of common sense, and I believe the majority of New Yorkers overwhelmingly, will agree with me. A bad guy, a criminal, is not getting a permit. He's going to get his gun. What you're doing is you're tying the hands of law-abiding citizens to protect themselves. And that's what the Supreme Court said, is that this state legislature has continuously overreached its laws. We've just seen it several times in New York, just redistricting. Again, it overreached. One-party rule allows for overreach and does not allow for consensus, and that's the problem. So I believe that this is basically stating quite clearly it's unconstitutional. If you're going to do it, make sure you pass the legislation that's right. I think what we need to do is make it tougher for criminals to get guns than it is for law-abiding citizens, small business owners, to protect themselves, their property, and their businesses and their families. Well, that's the problem here. They want to take the guns. Democrats want to take the guns away from people who are being victimized by these guns. And we have communities, minority communities and communities with high crime areas who we are taking no action to arrest those people to make sure that there's not crime against their neighborhoods, against neighbors in those communities or in any communities. But what we want to do, we want to disarm law-abiding citizens, and that's wrong.
And the statistics are very clear on this, Jesse, which is that 95 to 97% of the crimes that are committed by criminal defendants are committed with the possession of illegal guns, not legal guns. So it's a very, very small, de minimis percentage of crimes committed by holders of illegal guns. And people should not forget that. And the right of self-defense is a sacred right. It's a fundamental right. And the Second Amendment recognizes that. And there's another case. I'm sorry.
You tell me, Judge, you don't think that a law-abiding citizen, a guy that's worked 10 hours, gets on the subway, just wants to get home, that he doesn't need something to protect himself? In the New York City subway, where we've seen crime run rampant, where we've seen members of the Asian community and people and innocent people of all sorts of nature being thrown in front of a train?
I think that the statistics show that in places where you have lawful carry, so for example in some of the southern states or in Texas,
yes,
where they have the ability to do that, the number of incidents of those kinds of crimes with other people using guns, the bad guys using guns, are considerably down. That's what the numbers show.
Absolutely.
Now, let me raise another constitutional issue with you that came out of the Supreme Court. There was a coach I think he was a football coach, and after the game, he would kneel and say a prayer. He didn't ask his players to pray with him. He didn't coerce them. He didn't even discuss it with them. He would just go on the sidelines after the game was over and say a prayer. He was fired because of that, Jesse. They said he had no right to do that. And the Supreme Court, in its decision, said, look, he had a First Amendment right of religion to exercise and practice his religion. There was no coercion exercised by him against his players. There's no coercion or persuasion used against them. If they wanted to join in, they could. If they didn't want to join in, they didn't have to. And they said that superseded the right of the school board to terminate his contract. What do you say?
I think it's 70 years too long and too late for that decision to come forward. I believe that is a huge win for religious freedom in this country and the expression of our faith. It was wrong. How many times have we seen professional and high-level collegiate athletes kneel in the middle of the football field or on the field in a moment of prayer, whether it be for another teammate that may have been hurt or maybe at the end of the game, and no one says anything about it? However, that's in the eyes of those school board members, that was wrong. But it's okay for, Kaepernick, the former quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers, to kneel during the national anthem, and that's a right he's allowed. These are expressions that we should have, and there's respect for our flag, and there's respect for our faiths. And I'm glad the Supreme Court, again, took a measured, common sense approach to the law so that it allows all members of faith and all members of our community, whether you are a member of faith or not, to be able to express themselves under the Constitution's First Amendment.
All right, and let me raise another case for you that just came down in the New York State Supreme Court, and that is that whole issue of non-citizens having the right to vote in municipal elections in New York City. That is for mayor, for public advocate, for city controller, for borough president, or city council members, allowing non-citizens to come in and vote and just establish residency in 30 days. And the state Supreme Court justice said you can't do that because the state constitution is very clear that only citizens have the right to vote, and the local government does not have a right to convey a right to vote in a municipal election when the state constitution is very clear that only citizens have that right. What do you say about that?
Again, I mean, here's a New York City-based Supreme Court justice who, again, surprises me, and it gives me hope of the system of government we have, because that justice looked at the rule of law, looked at the Constitution, in fact, quoted the article itself, where it clearly states that citizens are the ones that have the ability to vote in elections, local elections, national elections, state elections. And again, it is a win for common sense. It's a win for common sense New Yorkers, and it's a win for the rule of law.
And it avoids, by the way, and the practical consequence of that, Jesse, it avoids packing the voting rolls with people who really have no connection to the city, and it avoids diluting the rights of citizens and their right to vote. And I think that was part of the judge's decision. So, absolutely, because once you allow non-citizens to be on the voter rolls for a certain election and not others, they are going to spill out. Electoral malfeasance, electoral shenanigans in New York City is as historic and dates back to Boss Tweed. If we do not think that the power brokers that want to hold on to their authority and their gimmicks in New York City are not going to allow this to be one of their tools that help tip national and federal elections, we are just putting our head in the sand and being very naive about it. This was a strong decision for the Constitution. It's a strong decision for voters here in the state of New York. In fact, it enhances their position, not dilutes it, as you pointed out. Okay, Kevin has given us that sign. We're going to take a break. This is a Long Island Report. We had a wonderful show so far. We've done the first two segments. Jesse Garcia and I will be right back after this short break. This is Judge Richard Weinberg. Please hold on, and we'll be right back.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
This is the Long Island Report. We're back. This is Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my esteemed colleague and good friend, Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse, we're in the third of four segments today. What would you like to discuss now?
I think that one of the things we've discussed here is the failure of the Biden administration and the one-party rule in Washington to secure our borders. And we've talked about national security and allowing, drug dealers, cartels, criminals, terrorists to come across unchecked. But now it's taken another twist. Here we just recently, early in the week, we found out that at least 51 migrants were found dead after being found in an abandoned truck in San Antonio. The blood and the death of these souls stands squarely with the failed policies of the Biden administration and all of the Democratic leaders that have done nothing to secure our borders, because this demonstrates that it not only keeps us safe, it keeps those who want to seek a better future, not to break the law, but also lose their lives. So now it's a national security issue, and now it's a humanitarian problem. We're seeing these migrants who are being extorted by coyotes, paying the people to try and get them over the border. And what are they doing? In many cases, and this is probably just one case that we have found, that others are not publicized. This is a situation where they've paid money and they've paid with their lives to these unscrupulous coyotes that want nothing and care nothing of human life. That's a direct result of the failed, ill-advised leadership of the Biden administration. What say you?
Well, I think I haven't seen a definitive investigative report yet, but based on conversations we had with various experts on immigration on the Cats at Night show, this question became, how do those people get into that truck? did the truck come over the border, or did the people jump the border and then they were rounded up and put in a truck when they were in Texas territory? And that's going to be an instructive inquiry, and I'd like to know the answer to that. I think it's probably the latter. I think they jumped the border and then they were rounded up and put in a truck for future delivery somewhere else. And the person who was driving the truck, based on the last report I heard, might have been high on methadone and meth, and he ran off and he left those people locked in there, and they had an excruciating, horrible death. The Durbin, who's the number 2 in the United States Senate, and Senator Tillis, who's a Republican, one of the bright stars in the Republican Party in the United States Senate, they're traveling in Europe as we speak, Jesse, and they've worked on other issues together, and they're trying to come up with some sort of package to deal with the immigration crisis. And you correctly pointed out, and it's a very apt instruction to all of us, people have been talking about cleaning up the immigration crisis for years. Obama, when he was president, had both houses of the Congress under his control. If he wanted to do a real reform of immigration, to have orderly, legal immigration, because we're all for immigration, but make sure that it's lawful immigration, that you're not allowing people to jump the borders illegally and distorting our national security and the rule of law in this country. So hopefully some good will come out of this. I understand there were previous examples of trucks being abandoned and people dying. And as one of the commentators on Cats Night said the other night, why do you think this is to be the last one to happen? As long as you have open borders, exactly, it's going to happen again. And it's another, as you correctly point out, it's another humanitarian reason to make sure that we clean up the immigration laws and we protect our borders. Very important. Another issue, Jesse, that's very interesting to me is the fossil fuel wars continue. And Macron, who's the leader of France, tried to explain the facts of life to our president, Joe Biden, and which is hard to explain the facts of life to him when he's in the sway of the ideologues and with their attack on fossil fuels. Fundamentally, Biden goes off and he's trying to beg the Saudis for more production. The problem, Macron told them, is that they're at 95 or 97% capacity. So you can beg all you want, but the Saudis cannot produce anymore. And so Biden, because he refuses to open up the taps, refuses to let the oil flow from Alaska, from Canada, shuts down the pipelines, creates every regulatory disincentive to build more refineries. You know, Jesse, in the last 20 years, the number of refineries have halved. We have 50% fewer refineries today than we had 20 years ago. Do you know how awful that is? You know how expensive it is to build a refinery and how many years it takes to build it? I mean, what are we doing? We've gone from energy independence to energy dependency. And what people don't understand, the linkage between energy dependency and the failure of the food supply or of medicines or of transit of goods and the inflation spirals that will go up because of the shortage of goods, it all works together, and it's an easy solution. And they do not have to raise the interest rates through the Fed. The Fed shouldn't do that because, Jesse, all the good economists, not the ones who are apologists for this ridiculous proposal, but all the good economists will tell you, you raise interest rates for the mortgages, what are you going to do? Makes it more expensive to have a house. There's going to be fewer houses built, fewer houses available for affordable housing for people, and it's an inflationary spiral. What say you?
You said a mouthful there, and Your Honor, I can't disagree with you. We went from energy, as you said, very aptly. We went from energy independence to energy dependence, and for us, for the president to be given a lesson in basic energy resources by the French president is laughable at the very least. But he's not wrong. We have the ability to safely, with little environmental risk, tap our own resources here, fossil fuels, oil, natural gas. We have to stop adding more and more regulations to prevent the entrepreneurial spirit to move this natural resource forward into our economy, to create the jobs we need. Maybe that's what's going to help with tamping down inflation instead of these mortgage rates, which is just going to heat up inflation. It's making it tougher right now for average Americans to even just have a cookout on Independence Day. It's going to cost us 17% more to have hamburgers and hot dogs and gatherings this year on Independence Day than it was last year. And that's because of the ill-advised economic policies of the Biden administration, because all they do is kowtow, as you said, the left-wing side of their party and really cripple the potential of the United States, both on energy, economically, and diplomatically.
And Jesse, we both agree we want to have clean energy. You know what the irony of these Green New Deal postures are? That China, India, Russia, and Germany are increasing their coal production. They're increasing the plants for digging of the coal. Their coal is not nearly as safe or as clean as United States coal. They've done everything in their powers not only to shut down coal production in this country and fossil fuels and natural gas, but they also put all kinds of regulatory obstacles with respect to nuclear power. So let me ask you a question. If you can't have fossil fuels and you can't have coal and you can't have nuclear, we're going to rely on the air and the sun to provide all the energy that we need? I mean, is that ridiculous or what?
It is ridiculous. You're the one who taught me all this Green New Deal, all these newfangled, climate change protective energy resources, wind, solar, and such. They all electric cars. They require fossil fuels for the creation of the electricity.
Of course.
I mean, it's ludicrous. And to get the material to create these batteries and to create these power sources and under the, Green New Deal that they want to put forward, we're going to be dependent upon our enemy, global enemy, China, and they're going to be – we still have to mine Mother Earth for all of these resources and then deal with the waste that comes with it. It's ludicrous. We're letting technology outpace our minds. I'm sorry. Our minds and the Democratic far-left policies are outpacing technology and our hearts, and that's got to be wrong.
Absolutely agreed. Kevin has given us a sign. This is the Long Island Report. This is Judge Richard Weinberg. I'm with Chairman Jesse Garcia, the Republican Party. We're taking a short break, and we will be back in a moment. Please hold on.
We're shipping Mother's Day gifts with a rapid-fire round of questions. Ready?
Yes. My gift. Can you pack it?
Yep.
Ship it?
Yes.
Guarantee it?
Of course.
Oh, send gift baskets?
For sure.
Protect electronics? Dog-proof it? Return it if they hate it?
Yes, no, and yeah.
Are you the UPS store?
Hey, we have a winner!
Visit the upsstore.com/guarantee for full details. Most locations are independently owned. Product, services, prices, and hours of operation may vary. See Center for details. The UPS Store. Visit a store today.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
This is the Long Island Report. This is Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my good friend and esteemed colleague, Jesse Garcia, the chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party and the vice chair of the state Republican Party. Jesse, this is our final segment for this week. There are a number of interesting issues to discuss. I want to begin with the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois. They continue to die. The crime is up. It's absolutely astronomical. Week after week, it's become the death toll and the amounts of violence are incredible. People are fleeing. For example, Citadel Investments, a Chicago-based firm that brings in billions of dollars of revenue to the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois. They've announced they're fleeing and they're going to Miami. Caterpillar, long based in Illinois, a proud Illinois citizen for over 100 years. They're moving to Texas. What do you say about that, Jesse?
I believe, as you have said to me off air, we've talked about it, this is a harbinger for New York. You can see that these companies that provide thousands of jobs and millions in taxes to stabilize and assist our local governments. That's to pay cops, firefighters, nurses, pay for our education. They're fleeing crime-ridden, overregulated, overtaxed, Democrat-controlled cities like Chicago, Illinois, and in the case you shared with me, Boeing moving to Virginia. They're leaving a woke state to go to Virginia where they can prosper. Our leaders here in New York should be looking at this. You're seeing this as the red light of alarm that's going to happen, and it has been happening here in New York. Fortunately, and I'm going to take a moment to champion our nominee. Lee Zeldin gets it. He has worked to keep businesses in the Long Island region and in New York. He has brought, even as a minority member of Congress, billions of dollars to the Brookhaven National Laboratory to create tens of thousands of new jobs and hundreds of millions of dollars of new investments. That's the type of spirit, ideas, and solutions we need to stop crime, overtaxation, overregulation, and stop the population moving out of New York with their money and their talent. It needs to stop. But first, we have to make our community safer. We have to make it more affordable, and we have to create an environment that's business-friendly so that the entrepreneurial spirit of America can grow here in the neighborhoods and the streets of New York.
That's absolutely right. I'm very concerned about the future of this great state. The term of art, which I claim to have coined, but I don't know if that's really correct. Maybe other people have used it, but I use it, and I call it the Californization of New York. These overly aggressive, far-left proposals, these so-called feel-good pieces of legislation and public policy, have cost the state of California and the state of New York some of the most productive citizens. They're losing their tax base. People are fleeing with their feet. Technology has allowed people to work remotely. They do not have to be in California. They do not have to be in New York. They do not have to be in Chicago. They can get out while the getting is good. And who's going to be left? The least productive, least tax-paying. And something came up in Cats at Night last night, and it was raised by one of my colleagues on the show, Tony Carbonetti, who is Mayor Giuliani's chief of staff. And I'll share this with you and our listeners. Hospitals, cultural institutions, charitable organizations are sustained by the middle, and upper middle class and the wealthy. When those classes flee, you're not going to have the money to sustain the hospitals, the charities, or the cultural institutions. So what does that do to quality of life in places like Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, New York? What do you think about that?
I agree with you. And, we talked about people moving their feet. The two of the four largest states in our union, New York and California, are losing congressional seats because people are fleeing their oppressive policies.
And what does that mean when you lose a congressional seat?
I mean, congressional seat, that means that your population has decreased. That happened for the first time. California is going from 53 House seats to 52 House seats. It's the first time it's gone down in its 171-year history of existence as a state here in this union. New York, we've seen this over a period of time since 2010. We've seen every 10 years, every time a census has been taken, the political voice and impact of New York has been reduced. Each time we've had to reset the population and reset the House to its 435 members. And we've lost seats. This year we've lost 2 seats. It's a direct result of the people saying they can't take it anymore. They've had enough, and they need to seek greener pastures, whether it be in Nashville, Florida, Virginia, one of the Carolinas, Georgia, Texas, all those states that now, as you pointed out, they don't need to be in the center of the business world, of the financial markets here on Wall Street. We're seeing companies not coming back at the same levels that they used to after COVID because, again, we did overreach and we did the wrong policies to shut down businesses and issue mandates here in New York that have stifled and have killed off businesses altogether.
That's exactly right.
Seen it.
And Jesse,
you've seen it.
Let me tell you this. because I have a couple of years on you, probably more than a couple of years, but I want you to be kind to me. So let me tell you this. When I was a young man, you had, I think the number was 43 or 45 members of the United States House of Representatives in Washington. And with that 43 to 45, that block was a powerful block that could take care of protecting the interests of the people of the state of New York. Now we're down to what, 26 or 28 seats?
Exactly.
And what does that mean? That means the loss of those seats means less power, less voice, less benefits flowing back to the state of New York. So when you lose population, it has all the negative effects, and in real life politics, less clout on Capitol Hill, which means less programs and less money is coming back to the state of New York. These have real life consequences, and I'm glad you pointed that out, Jesse. Now, next issue. Mr. Putin's war continues, and I saw a headline this morning on one of the channels, and it troubled me deeply. It says, key advisors in the Biden administration are saying Ukraine can't win the war against Russia. And it seems to me they're sending out a signal that they're abandoning in whole and part Ukraine's fight for independence and territory sovereignty. What do you say about that?
I think, again, we've got here, it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. The Biden administration and Security Council was slow and late to get into the ballgame. They tried, diplomacy without teeth and did not assist Ukraine with providing it the resources it needed militarily to fend off and maybe back off Putin's war machine. It was too little too late. And I'm not sure if that's the case, but certainly we need to keep the global community together with Ukraine because, again, if Russia and Putin is successful, they are not stopping Ukraine. They will have learned from their own lessons and failures and be better for it in the next incursion that they make further into Europe or into another region and whatnot. And again, we've spoken about this. China is the only benefactor of Putin's war. They are watching the failures and the tactics of both enemies and friends, Russia and NATO and all those governments, so that when they're prepared to seize territory, whether it be Taiwan or another region along the Indian Ocean, that they know what the responses are going to be. And that's a mistake. And I think that, we have to rise up as one voice, again, on a humanitarian basis. Russia sending missiles into a market filled with innocent people. Where is the outrage on a global scale of that? We've heard it, but it has not seemed to permeate as it should have had in earlier parts of this. It seems like now we are just accustomed to Putin's war in Ukraine, and it's just going to be a war of attrition now, and that's wrong. We're going to let this monster. We cannot let this monster seize any more territory because this is just one step in a long game for them.
If we've learned one lesson throughout history, it's as follows. If you stand back and you appease aggression, they'll keep going until they're stopped. That's number one. And number two, they have no regard for human life. We call it a war of attrition, and that's a nice way of calling it, and you and I have used that term. But what you're really talking about is war against humanity. These are war crimes. You're destroying innocent lives, civilians in a shopping mall, people in a hospital, kids in a school. They launch attack after attack after attack. And this is not acceptable. The world has to unite and has to go after Putin and hold him accountable. You can't go back, no matter what happens with this Ukrainian war, you cannot go back and treat him with the dignity of a legitimate sovereign. This man has repudiated the basic tenets of humanity, and he has to be held accountable. If we don't do that, we're going to go back into the dark ages of savagery, and it's only going to be the powerful that rule, and no one else will have any rights at all. And if you think, as you correctly point out, that this is just to the end game, we're just talking about a piece of Ukraine or all of Ukraine, and it's end there, tell that to the states surrounding Russia, because they're running, screaming to get protection from NATO. Sweden and Finland are now coming in to NATO. Turkey's gotten out of that way. to allow them to come in. But they're petrified. All the countries in the Baltic area are saying, we're going to be next. They're scared to death. And they need to know that they'll be rallied and protected against these crimes against humanity, because if they are next, when does this end? How does this end? Jesse, we've gotten the high sign. We have to sign off for this week's program. Once again, a privilege and a pleasure being here with you. Another great show. I hope our listeners have enjoyed it. This is Judge Richard Weinberg signing off for my good friend, my esteemed colleague, Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. We will be back next week. Jesse and I wish you and your family good health and long life and great safety. Talk to you next week. Thanks again.
Thank you.